topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV, where we bring you educational information from top local experts in the fields of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Now sit back and listen to experts in family law, association law, hearing loss, business brokers, home care, along with many other topics. Now here are your hosts, Steve-O and Sophia.
Hey, good afternoon, Illinois. Welcome to another Ask the Experts show where we bring you the top experts in the field of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. This is our 16th year, and next month will be our 17th year of providing you top experts in the field. We've got a great show. We kind of break up the show. The first half of the show is going to be on bankruptcy. And the second half of the show is going to be on tax relief. We have got so many of your questions, and I really appreciate it. It looks like most of you are all from Illinois. There's a few I see from Indiana, but that's okay too, because we're talking about federal bankruptcy and federal tax relief. We were able to get one of the finest attorneys in the state of Illinois, in Kevin Benjamin. We have been doing the show for about 2 years now. And again, I want to thank everybody. I just noticed that our YouTube numbers have gone way up, and we love providing this educational information. Let me introduce you to our long-standing expert. God, we have got so many questions for him today. And it's funny, people will say, hey, I love Kevin's stories. And I always kind of remind Kevin about it. We don't use any names at all, so it doesn't matter. But let's welcome Attorney Kevin Benjamin of the Benjamin Law Group, also Noble Tax Relief. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, how are you? It's Benjamin Legal Services, actually, but it's okay.
Okay, well, that's why I wanted to ask you about if we had all the right information up. Kevin, I got to tell you that there's a lot of people who still don't understand about bankruptcy. But before we get that, tell people about your firm.
Kevin Benjamin, Benjamin Legal Services, though the domain is benjaminlaw.com. So the information up there is. Basically, I also have a Noble Tax Relief for tax resolution, but we also, I'm an attorney. I'm also licensed in the U.S. Tax Court. I'm a litigator. We do a lot of bankruptcy, debt restructuring, tax resolution, IRS issues, some state issues and taxes, and litigation. Can you see me okay?
I'm sorry?
Can you see me okay?
I'm actually on a different screen. Are we getting Kevin okay, Juan? Yes.
Okay, great. Okay.
Yes, we can see you fine. I have to go to a different screen because I'm reading all these listeners and viewers' questions, and I have to go away from the screen. So don't be itching under your arms because I won't know it. So let's go. We're going to start with bankruptcy today, Kevin. And I kind of tell you, I was surprised. A lot of business questions, as well as individual. So let's get started. Most of these are all from all over Illinois. We had two of them from Indiana. Our first one is Chapter 11 for a business or is it for an individual?
Both. I mean, normally people think of Chapter 11 as a corporate restructuring of debt, and a Chapter 13 is more of a personal restructuring of debt, kind of like a 13 is like a court order bill consolidation, a simpler, more streamlined, less expensive Chapter 11. However, an individual can file Chapter 11, and sometimes they actually have to, but yes, they can. And there's different reasons to do so. If you could do a 13 individually, you probably just do that because it's just easier and more powerful. But sometimes you have maybe too much debt. There's debt limits, or you need in a Chapter 13, you really are limited to about 60 months, and you can get a little longer time in a Chapter 11 for individual, depending on the situation.
There's an unusual, I don't even know it. Is what are the various types of Chapter 11? I didn't know there was different types.
Yeah, well, there's a regular Chapter 11. There's a what they call a sub 5 Chapter 11, which is since February of 2020, which is a particular small business. There's a small business Chapter 11, which is different than a sub 5, which is also a small business. There's a regular Chapter 11. There's a single asset real estate Chapter 11. So they're all Chapter 11s, but there's different deadlines on, like, when to file the plan, and when, if you have to have in a sub 5, there's a sub 5 trustee appointed to help try to get a consensual plan. Where in the other cases, you're still a debtor in possession. So your business, you're still, whether individual or in a business, you're still running things the same way. But in a sub 5, there's a sub 5 Chapter 11 trustee to help try to get a consensual plan with the creditors. In the other Chapter 11s, there is not a trustee appointed. Sometimes a trustee can be appointed, and sometimes there's a reason for it, but usually there's not. So your debtor in possession, and the U.S. trustee's office oversees it, but they're not the trustee in the case. Like in a Chapter 7, there's a trustee who's liquidating the estate, or looking at assets and stuff. Chapter 13, there's a Chapter 13 trustee who's kind of has certain duties. You don't have that in Chapter 11. You're kind of doing it yourself. You're kind of acting as the trustee, or the attorney's acting. For example, on Chapter 11, I'd be the attorney for the Chapter 11 estate, which is actually like the company. And then the person who's a designated representative from the company is acting for the company. So that's how it works. And then the plan and things that you do in the Chapter 11 for the reorganization have to benefit the estate. So it's the business, or if you're an individual, to benefit the individual. So you're kind of acting as the trustee. Unless you're a sub 5 trustee, then there's a one working with you to get a plan confirmed.
Kevin, I'm going to ask you a question because I think this is probably the most important question I can ask you today, is why it's so important to have a attorney represent you when it comes to bankruptcy.
Well, bankruptcy is not just filling out forms. So people think, well, you just fill out the forms. You got to know how to fill out the forms, how to claim the exemptions, what the rules are, the bankruptcy rules, the procedures, what you're saying, what you're obligated to disclose, which is everything, by the way. So you get, I see a lot of people pro se just filling out forms, and then they're not getting a discharge, or they're barred from discharge, or they're getting adversary proceedings to contest discharge, or getting charged with bankruptcy fraud. So I just have an attorney represent you if I was you. Every case is different. I mean, there's Chapter 7s, there's 13s. The fee structures are different. A lot of attorneys take payments on the consumer cases. Chapter 7, 13 to be worked out. Sometimes some money up front, some money in the plan paid by the trustee. Chapter 11 is a little different. It's more labor intensive, a lot more work, a lot more expensive. That's more hourly, approved by the court on fee applications, but there's an upfront retainer. And then the filing fee for Chapter 11 is $1,738 at this time, where at 13 filing fee is $313, and a Chapter 7 is $338 at the time. So there's different fees and costs involved.
Yeah, I think it's so important.
When a
for
Chapter 11, a business can't represent themselves anyway.
Right.
And you can't be like the president of the company represent, because you can't. You got to have a lawyer for that. Whether it's a corporate 11, corporate Chapter 7, the corporation can't do a 13, so you have to worry about that. But like a Chapter 11, obviously having a lawyer, because this as a matter of fact, attorneys have to be approved by the court to even represent you in Chapter 11, because they got to show the court, they know what they're doing, because that's how more complicated it is. Chapter 13, there's different motions. There's claims filed in Chapter 13 by creditors. Maybe you're going to file objections. There's modifying the stay, different creditor issues. So you really want to have an attorney. And so the court wants to have an attorney too. And so the trustees, they want to streamline the documents you have to give them, that kind of stuff. Chapter 7, that goes about 4 to 5 months from the time you file the case to the time you're discharged. They're less expensive than a 13 or an 11, so it's definitely worth the attorney fees just to make sure you're filing things right and you're going to get your discharge and things of that nature, and don't get dismissed.
I was meeting a bankruptcy attorney here in Florida who was looking to come on with us, and I met him at the courthouse, and I sat in for the bankruptcy procedures, and I was shocked. They go by pretty fast. Maybe it's not always that way, but I was shocked how fast they went.
Yeah, I mean, depending on the judge, there's a lot of cases like you have the regular court call. Like a lot of judges have like Chapter 7, 13, 11 days. Sometimes they have 1 day a week, sometimes more than 1 day, because they try not to have their docket just, crazy. Like Chapter 13 days are a lot more busy. There's a lot more kind of cases. Chapter 11s, they try to have really only 11s, because you need more time before the court. And 13 or 7s, a lot of the motions are routine, but there's a lot of them, So sometimes you're there for a while. But yeah, sometimes they go right through them. But they don't always know. I mean, you don't always need your client on the call. So like I had talked to a client today. This case was dismissed yesterday, and he wrote me. He's like, "Hey, I was on the Zoom and blah blah blah, and your partner was on the Zoom, and I don't know it was dismissed." I mean, we were on, and he knew why, just simply behind on payments. So you got a 14 days before the order is final. You could reinstate it. You could vacate. It's not a big. It's procedural. I'm saying. Or in his case, maybe he's better off starting over, depending on the situation. So, everyone can panic, but there's different options. That's why you have a lawyer. Like I told him, just relax. You can either reinstate the case if you could pay this, or if that's too much, you just start over. It's no big deal. He's been in the case for a couple of years. It's good faith filing. Plan was already confirmed. Paid a lot of money to the trustee already. Just had a little problem, got behind. And maybe sometimes the court would even tell you you're trying to catch up on payments, and depending on how much it is, the court may even say that's a lot of money to start over. So it's not the end of the world for good faith filings, which is most people are. They're just trying to weed out the ones that are just filing, not paying the trustee, stopping a sale or jacking with the creditors. You can't do that.
We just got a text from Mark. Hey, I'm really enjoying the show. I just found it today. How long does bankruptcy stay on your credit record?
Well, it depends. Technically, a Chapter 7 could be 10 years. A 13 could be 7 years after discharge. So it could be 10 or 12 years or less than 10, depending on if you're paying the plan off sooner. But that has nothing to do with your credit or being able to get a loan. You're not barred from getting a loan. All this misconception, oh my God, you can't get credit for 10 years. That's all BS. Being on your credit is one thing, and that may lower your credit score, but you might get a mortgage, for example, or your credit score is not just your payment history or your public records. It's your debt to income ratio, your credit utilization rate, and Have you used the credit limit up higher than paid it off? All these various different factors for your credit score. There's no law that says you can't get credit. People get credit out of Chapter 7 right away. Car loans, mortgages, credit card, they'll be offering you stuff in the mail. But there's no bar. So that's kind of a misconception. But yes, technically it can stay in your credit report for 10 years. And sometimes you could have it removed if it's not reported correctly. But having it removed, if you apply for a loan, and they say, have you filed bankruptcy the last 10 years, and it's not on your credit report, but you got to say yes, or you're committing bank fraud. So it's not a big deal. But if it's not on your credit report, you may get more credit points. But nobody really cares. For example, Chapter 7, you can't file again for 8 years. So people want, like on a car loan. Well, great. The car loan goes 5 or 6 years. You can't file for 8, right? You have a job. They report to the credit bureau. They're happy to give you a car. I mean, not just because you file bankruptcy, but, are you working? I mean, the BK is not going to stop you, but you still got to qualify for the loan otherwise. Same on a mortgage, right? So now you're 3 months out of the case. Maybe a lender has a problem, but some lenders 6 months, a year, 2 years, less usually than that. They just want to see how you're reestablishing your credit. Some lenders also now are looking at the Chapter 13 trustee payments. If you're in 13, they can maybe use that as like seasoning, like showing you're making payments and kind of help you out, to give you a little more credit for stuff like that. But the biggest issue is if you're filing a Chapter 7 or 13 or 11, there's a reason for it, right? Like I have people call all the time. I even got a couple of days ago. Well, what's going to do to my credit? Well, you're in foreclosure, about to lose your house. You haven't paid your mortgage in 2 years, and you're not paying your credit card. How's your credit? I mean, if you're worried about your credit, and then pay your bills, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, start packing because you're gonna lose your house. So sometimes there's no time. I had someone come in a couple of days ago on a tax matter, and he came in, and it's a business, and I'm like, he didn't even know if it's. He thought he signed up to help me resolve an IRS matter. Got the paperwork. Are you sure doesn't bring any documentation on the IRS thing? I'm going to send the power of attorney in, and I tell him, give me some letter. And I'm like, this IRS agent, you keep wanting me to call, which I can't call until I have a power of attorney on file. Turns out that's not an IRS agent. It's the Illinois Department of Revenue. So I'm like, dude, I had to redo everything, a state power of attorney, different contract. I mean, he doesn't even know who he owes. I'm saying, and based upon what the company owed, I thought this sounds like the state issue, but he's insisting anyway. But it's just weird that people don't even know what they're owing, even when they're getting mail. But in that case, I'm like, you're better off doing a Chapter 11. He didn't want to do it, but the company is doing, not him, right? It's not going to be any personal credit. So I said, if you got to get shut down, we may have to file. Okay, we'll try the tax thing first. He leaves the office, texts me within 30 minutes. Oh, I forgot to mention, I talked to the person this morning that they're shutting me down Monday, which is in 2 days.
Oh, gosh.
I said, well, yeah, I called. So that's it's not a minor detail that you.
Yeah.
And you got the wrong power of attorney. So you just signed that. Yes, I got to, when this is over, I filed it or uploaded it. So I just got to call this agent and try to get an extension, try to work this out with them, try to avoid the Chapter 11, which is fine. But as an attorney who also does bankruptcy, I could do both, where a lot of people can't. So I'm happy to, whatever you need. You want me to try to restructure your debt outside of bankruptcy? Sometimes it's better to file. Sometimes it's the filing is the backup plan, right? Sometimes you have no choice. If you're going to lose your liquor license or they're shutting you down, and I can't get them extended, should file. Stay in business. In this case, he didn't pay a lot of the sales tax. He knew he had to pay it. He just didn't. Well, you got to pay it. You know what I'm saying? But you can restructure that and pay it over time. You know what I'm saying? And the best way to pay it is to stay in business. The guy has a good business going. So, you don't want, but, with the state, at least in Illinois, if you're not paying your sales tax, right, they're shutting you down. So you got to work something out to keep in business, show some kind of good faith. I can handle it, but it's just with short notice and sometimes they don't tell you all the facts, which makes things a little difficult. But again, I could do the bankruptcy, I could do an 11, I could do a 7, 13. I'm in the U.S. tax court if we have to go that far. I could do the IRS resolutions or state, outside of bankruptcy. So I could do a lot of things a lot of other lawyers can't do. But there are, other lawyers could file bankruptcy, other lawyers could do tax resolution. Some could do both, like me, but not all.
What I love about your practice, Kevin, is you only concentrate in the area of debt relief, whether it's the IRS or whether it's bankruptcy. And you've been in practice for a long time. You've seen, you think there's anything you haven't seen yet?
No, I mean, there's always something coming up, I guess, but when they changed the laws and stuff, but the last big reform act was 2005. So, that a lot of that hasn't changed yet. Some student loan stuff is starting to happen, but, Biden was trying to do some things and then Trump came in and doing something else. So that's a whole kind of a mess right now. But, but mostly it's like the debt restructuring is what it is. So like, for example, in bankruptcy, sometimes you have tax issues, right? Sometimes if you're just have a tax issue with the IRS, you may have other debts, right? Sometimes people don't know you could restructure other debts, lower payments. People are like, oh, I need a loan mod. Well, first of all, you're not always entitled to one. Second of all, what other debts do you have? Because I can maybe restructure some of those, lower those payments, and now, you actually can make your payment. You actually had it, but you didn't know it, right? So that's why you have a lawyer. But it goes hand in hand. So, that's how we got into doing the tax and the bankruptcy, because the way you analyze a case in a bankruptcy with a 7, 13, like a means test, they call it, and a chapter or the IRS, let's say, offer a compromise where you're negotiating the possible reasonable collection potential, and the IRS standards on expenses and stuff like that. So it's very, very similar. And you're just working out debt. How do I pay? Who's the priority? Because like we do a restructuring, it's kind of like a court-ordered bill consolidation, a Chapter 13. I try to make it simple like that. But in reality, it's not like a consolidation where it's like, okay, you owe $1,000, 10 creditors, everyone gets 1/10 of the payment a month, right? You have different priorities. Maybe it's the mortgage, the arrearage. They may get paid in full before the credit cards get anything. Maybe you're paying the mortgage in full, or the car catching up, whatever. But maybe you're paying the credit cards, 5, 10%, 3%, pennies on the dollar. It's kind of like doing both, but it's a 13. You don't always have to pay all your creditors back in full. You got to do a liquidation analysis. I mean, I just filed a case yesterday. No, actually, I filed it 2 weeks ago, but the plan was due yesterday, or the documents. And he owes 100 unsecured. I mean, it was 125,000 arrearage on or maybe a couple bucks more on the mortgage. A lot of money, but it makes good money. He's got some income coming too. So we did a 13 instead of an 11 because it's actually cheaper, more affordable, and it's actually more powerful to get because he can afford it. So I don't need a vote in a Chapter 11. I think the vote of the creditor. I wouldn't need it. I show we can afford to do it, right? But that's a big, arrears plus keeping his current mortgage. Not to mention the $150,000 in unsecured debt, right? But I'm doing it. I'm like, we don't have to pay back the $150 in full. We got to pay back some of it, but that helps the payment a lot to make it feasible when you restructure your plan.
Here's a question from Diane. It's a 2-part question. She says, does Chapter 11 wipe out all debt? And what is the downside of Chapter 11?
Well, I don't think there's a downside. I mean, you're not going to file for fun, right? So, and most Chapter 11s don't work, but sometimes they work long enough to help out a situation. And there's different kinds of Chapter 11. Are you doing corporate? Are you doing an individual? Are you doing a sub-5 single asset real estate? Are you doing a small business one, a regular one? There's quarterly fees sometimes in Chapter 11, depending on which kind you do. So I guess the downside would be that, right? It's more expensive than Chapter 11, right? Mm-hmm. You have to file what's called monthly operating reports. So your business, you're filing, your cash flow and some other documents, stuff like that. So that's public. You have certain duties and obligations as a debtor. So not everything's private. And if you own the business, on your equity, and depending on your Chapter 11 plan, and you're owed money from your company, how do you structure that? Are you keeping your equity, or there's also what's called absolute priority rule, where a creditor could say, even though you're trying to pay me less than 100%, I declare I want 100, on a secured creditor. And then there's ways to overcome that too, but in negotiation, there's could be cash collateral issues in a Chapter 11. Maybe you have a rental building, and that's cash collateral. You got to do cash collateral motions to agree to use that money to pay certain things. You got to agree with the creditor because they're cash collateral. I have a case in Wisconsin. Someone just filed one right now. They're saying they have a security interest on a loan. My client said it was unsecured. That the cash is cash collateral, so they don't want to use it for anything, which would shut this business down. So I got to deal with that right after this our session with you. Make an arrangement. So I guess the downside is a little more public scrutiny. You got to file some financials. Your cash flow. You have some quarterly fees depending on what kind of case it is. And the fees aren't high on the quarterly fees, and it's like on a sub 5, there's not even quarterly fees. But filing the reports could be tedious depending on how like I have a one in Iowa I was doing. The operating reports are pretty simple because they're just kind of trying to develop land, so there's not a lot of cash flow. It's hardly anything coming through. I have other ones that are like trucking businesses, other things that have 25 trucks and lots of moving parts. It takes a while to do those operating reports. Sometimes I work with their CPA to do it. I mean, sometimes they're kind of labor intensive. Individuals, if they have QuickBooks, I could do them pretty easy. Otherwise, sometimes they get a little complicated too if you're a self-employed person. But that would be the downside. What bills are wiped out? Chapter 7 is liquidation. Chapter 11 is a restructuring. Now, it doesn't mean you got to pay all your bills back in full. You could pay some nothing or unsecured some less, the way you're doing it and everything else. But it's not like you're filing a Chapter 7 just to wipe out debt. Because if you're doing a Chapter 11, there is a Chapter 11 liquidation. Okay, but that's very rare because usually you file Chapter 11 to restructure and keep the business going. It's an ongoing concern, right? So you're trying to keep the business alive. So you're paying back what you have to, and usually if you're in Chapter 11, there's some kind of secured or collateral there because it's usually maybe it's a mortgage issue on a building, or the business has a merchant account loans, they have liens on it, or other loans that have cash collateral on there. You got payroll issues. Insurance, so a lot of these debts, like on my trucking one, in Wisconsin, they're mostly trucks, right? So we want to pay them, so there's not a lot of unsecured debt in that.
Final bankruptcy question. If I'm audited, should I have an attorney accompany me?
Audited for what?
IRS.
Yeah, absolutely. If you got an audit, yeah.
See, I don't think most people know that, Kevin, that you should have an attorney.
Yeah, you're going in there, you want representation.
Yeah, I would absolutely think so.
You're going into an audit, they're looking for things, not only to make you pay, but maybe to go to the criminal division. So depending on, I don't know this person's, situation, I'm saying. But, I have one right now, someone called me 2 days ago. They're saying their situation is in the criminal division. So I'm looking at it, and it's more serious. But usually just owing money is just, owing money. But maybe maybe they pay employment taxes, they call it the trust fund penalty. But even that's not necessarily criminal, but you got to pay it back, right? So right. But if they're auditing you, they could be auditing you for, falsifying records. That's not good. Yeah, you should get a lawyer.
I just heard today, Kevin, that with the shutdown, that they're going to be furloughing 19,000 IRS agents. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, I heard that too. It's a mess.
Oh my, what? I mean, it was a mess before. What is that going to do to
But
your
I
business?
have some like Chapter 11 cases right now, and I was emailing with the U.S. trustee who monitors the case, not the trustee on the case, right? And I started getting some autoresponders. Hey, I'm furloughed. uh, you know, talk to you later. So
Yeah,
I don't know what we're doing on those motions or the issues they were doing. So like some of these courts, like our court, were open. Originally, they said they were going to be through October 3rd. Then it was the 15th. There's different funding for different. Some are paid to a certain time, but I mean, like October 3rd to 15th, that's a couple of days, it's a couple of weeks. So, and I do cases in different jurisdictions, and some are shutting down different times than others. And we've had it before. It's happened before. It's not the first time, but usually the shutdown's pretty, short.
yes,
But with this day and age, the government and the way everyone's fighting the Dems and Republicans, not to be political on this, but they're drawing lines in the sand here for political reasons, it seems like. So on either side, whatever, could go a little longer. I mean, Trump was threatening to not only furlough is just, you're kind of like laid off, right?
yeah,
I was talking about firing people, right?
I
That's
know.
different than a furlough. Also, usually on a furlough, when the government reopens, you get your back pay, even though you're going home not working. And now the administration is saying no, unless Congress, when they have the budget agreement, puts that in the budget, which they probably will. I'm saying, then they don't even want to give people back pay. So,
But the
it's
first
also,
thing came to my mind was sometimes it's really hard to get a hold of them. God, it's really probably going to
it's
be
hard to get a hold
difficult.
of them anyway. Like
Yeah,
sometimes if someone's got a revenue officer or a revenue agent, right? Well, now you got a little more direct. It's easier to get because you got the direct contact with the person. If someone's what they call ACS, which is the automatic collection systems, which aren't really assigned yet, when you call the IRS, you're calling this main number. Yeah, you get a lot of hold times and long time. Even if you're a lawyer, they don't know you're calling. You're on hold until someone answers the phone. And then if you get a person answering the phone who doesn't know what they're doing, they may either hang up on you by accident. Then you're back in the queue, so to speak, on there. Otherwise, maybe they don't know what they're doing. Just because they work for the IRS doesn't mean they know anything. They could have been hired
right.
last year on those, they're entry level. They don't know the Internal Revenue Manual and the code, and they're wrong sometimes. You know what I'm saying, and now it's like, okay, thank you. Now I got to call back. Because like you can get somebody else. You're saying, but it's not always easy to get someone else. You got to call back, and you have all these long times. Or sometimes they try to transfer you to somewhere, which you just cross your fingers during the transfer. It's not just like dial tone.
Here's a really good question from Mark. Wants to know, he said, I have not filed in 3 years. Should I wait to get a letter from the IRS or
No.
should I contact you now?
What state are you in? Yeah, you can call me.
Illinois.
Sure. Yeah.
He's in Cook County.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because you just file them, right? I mean, if you owe money, we'll deal with it. Okay. The number one thing the IRS wants is you to be compliant. As a matter of fact, if you owe money to the IRS, you can't even do a resolution unless you're compliant. So if you owe 3 years of taxes, you're not even, eligible to even be considered for anything, right? Also, they want you in the system. And if you were filing bankruptcy and you don't file your returns, they kick you out. I just had one filed. They owed state of Illinois like $260,000, and she wanted to get a discount. But I looked at it. I'm like, well, you have hundreds of thousands of dollars equity in your house. Then it turned out they have a commercial property paid for with $400,000 or $500,000. Like, you're not getting a discount, right? But they sure want to be levied, right? So I said I could work it out, and maybe, or in her case, we wasn't even 11. We just filed a Chapter 13 because now she has the option. She's looking to either refinance it, I think we may have a contract on it. One of the commercial people in the building may be buying it. But the point is, got the automatic stay. No one's levying her. She's either going to refinance it or sell it and pay off everything, or she could just make the payments over 5 years and not do either one of those. Or she could do, in this case, the commercial tenant, she could do she could finance the mortgage herself and sell her financing. Take maybe 50, 100,000, up front. We're talking about with them. Put that towards maybe lowering some stuff, and then just pay the rest of it over the 60 months. All kinds of different options. However, she hadn't filed her returns. In Chapter 13, you got to have 4 years. She only had 2. I told her she had 45 days. Of course, she wasted the last minute. The motion to dismiss up was just yesterday for not doing the taxes. She got them done finally after me begging her. She's like, well, I'm working on it, busy. I'm like, well, you're busy at the end of September. You're busy. You're going to be dismissed. Lose everything. But she got it done. Mostly withdrawn and pursuing. But even in 13, because it's a federal law, right? They don't care about your state returns, but it's the federal government saying, hey, we're allowing this restructuring because they encourage 13s. You keep all your assets, equity, your cash. If you can pay it faster than 5 years, you don't have to, so it's just everyone back off and give a breather, right? But like the IRS wants you compliant on a resolution, they want you compliant on return. Compliant means just file the returns. If you owe money, that's not an issue. If I'm doing a 13, you owe the money, let's put it in a 13. We'll work it out. As a matter of fact, in this 13, when you don't file, they file an estimated one for you, which is always a huge number. So then we got the real ones. They amend the complaint. So it doesn't make a difference. Now, in this person's question, I'm not saying you're filing bankruptcy, but let's get your returns done, right?
Right.
The CPA will do it, or your accountant, right? If you owe money, we file. I have one, and even when you file them, it could be 12 weeks before it gets into their system. Even when we call, they say, yeah, we see it, but it's not really knowledge, that kind of stuff. But you're filed, you're done. I'm saying, so now you're compliant at least, and we can start working on, do you qualify for an offer in compromise or installment agreement or a partial pay installment agreement or offer compromise? What kind? How many documents do we need? Stuff like that. They are going to be very happy to file. Okay, so yes, file your returns because you're compliant, whether you're filing bankruptcy or that. And I'm assuming in this person, it's a civil division. Sounds like you just didn't file. You may owe some money, right? Okay, we owe some money. Now we resolve it, right? And that's all they want. Because now you're back in the system, and now you're just resolving debt with them through me, and they're happy to do that. Okay, same thing if you're filing bankruptcy, and so not a big deal. But not filing doesn't do you any good, and waiting until they catch you. You're getting paid right now. You're getting charged failure to file and failure to pay. Huge fees and interest. So you got to stop all that. And depending on how much you owe, we'll figure out what we're doing as far as the resolution. So yeah, call me.
Okay. How does the IRS initially communicate with taxpayers about their unpaid taxes?
By letter.
Okay.
They don't call you, and they don't email you. So if you're getting a phone call from the IRS, it's not the IRS. Okay. And if you get an email from the IRS, it's not the IRS. Right.
Wow. Okay, that's good to know.
Send your letter. They don't do any of that. Right. They're not contacting you and telling you the police are coming to your house if you don't go get some discount cards from Target, or crypto, you pay, I had a family member yesterday. They were watching the Cub game, the playoffs, and they're like, hey,
that's right.
Had an IRS issue several years ago, and it's paid, right? Getting letters now. Hey, could this be? I said, well, let me see the letters, because a lot of these, there's also scams on these companies that send you a letter, try to make it look like it's coming from the government, where it's not, right? So you got to be very careful. And I have clients sometimes who call. No, the IRS called me. No, they didn't call you. No, they They didn't call you. Kevin, I just talked. No, you talked to a scammer overseas who's telling you something. They didn't call you. Right? There's nothing. Nobody don't relax. You know what I'm saying. So, but there's so many scams, out there.
Yes.
And I could look at an official letter for you, And also, I could pull the file. I'm saying the IRS. There's power of attorney I can get to represent you, or there's a Form 8821, which is authorization. And someone could hire me. I can get the IRS file. I could do a whole analysis on your collection statute expiration dates, potential bankruptcy filings, audit risk factors, other issues, that may be popping up. Also, when things are filed and deadlines, like for example, can you discharge in bankruptcy, depends on various factors, right? Not that someone's calling just always file a bankruptcy, but my job is what are your options, right? And then sometimes I say, well, you could discharge X in maybe 6 months, and then 20,000 in this date, and then 100,000 right here. So even timing your filing, you want to time it to get your best bang for the buck, so to speak. Also, the C said the collection statute expiration date, is the deadline for the IRS to collect. It's like statute of limitations on a lawsuit. I'm saying, or malpractice claim, whatever. So it's like 10 years from the date of assessment with the IRS, not counting tolling dates, which is the same thing on other deadlines. So there's a general rule, and then there's exceptions because people do things that maybe it wasn't assessed on a certain day, or maybe you were in bankruptcy for 4 months, so it's told and it changes the dates. That's why you have a lawyer and reviewing all these things to make sure you know all your options, right? So like I have clients, a tax matter, I think it was, I just did a new report for her. It was like 600,000 plus, down from 800.
Wow.
Something like that. But because some of the taxes were 10 years old, that dropped off, so they didn't get it yet, but she still got a significant amount, right? So, and even then, it's like she had a file, to be compliant, right? So she had to file the last couple of years return, which she did, right? So she got that done. So there's more owed, right? But then some was dropping off, but it's just whatever it is, right? But then when they file something, they were it appears they're getting some credit they're applying for some of the schedules. The IRS had some questions on, so I just told them what the questions were, and I'm still waiting to get back so I could answer them to see if they disallow anything, which I'll work with her CPA on that. I'm saying, but it is what it is. So I just want to make sure, you owe what you owe. There's also a lot of scams on like the ERC, employment retention credit, or these gas credits. And from years ago, especially during COVID, I get a lot of phone calls. No, the IRS got a letter. I don't owe them any money. Now they're telling me I owe 40 grand because they audited your 2022 return and you had this gas credit. You don't even have a business, and you had some scam person basically filed a false return that you signed, which is a felony. Okay. And they're reversing their credit. And yes, you owe the money. Can I keep you out of the criminal division on that? I can if you act quick, but we're going to have to work on an arrangement and pay it. Well, this person, I know some person, your friend told you, hey man, this person's really good. They get me a big refund. Yeah, it's a big refund. It's called fraud. So, and people, they don't know. They believe what they want to believe. Or maybe, 10, 20, 30, 40 grand. It's a lot of money, right? And like, wow, this person's really good. Yeah, not really. Then you give them a chunk, right? So they're charging you a chunk, the scammer. That's always a red flag too. But always have a real accountant or CPA do it, not someone, I have someone in federal court in Chicago. I'm like, they're all over you. You're in trouble, right? Like it's less than $1 million. No, I don't know nothing. Okay, I think you do. Comes in the office. No, I got an accountant. And then when I file these amended returns and new returns, we're not going to owe anything. Who's the person? Oh, somebody in Indiana. Okay, that can be fine, but why Indiana? Well, I got this person. Okay, you got this person, right? Who's the person? Right? Could be real. I don't know, but it sounds like a bunch of BS to me. But I'm like, Yeah, we're in federal court. We'll see. Show me the returns. Have it all waived magically by the accountant. Right?
You know, I have learned so much about tax relief from you. One of the biggest things I've learned from you, Kevin, is if you start off trying to handle this yourself and talk to the IRS yourself, you can actually cause more damage to your case by talking to them yourself when all they had to do is retain you and they don't even have to talk to the IRS anymore.
You always want representation. I have people say, "Oh, I just did it myself." Well, how'd you do it yourself? Well, you called the IRS and they told you what you could pay. Great. How you know? You think that's the best deal? You know what I'm saying? How about this program? Well, they didn't mention that. Oh, they didn't? So they gave you the full pay thing, just, make payments. And maybe it is, but, otherwise they say, oh, you go on the IRS site and you can do your own installment agreement. You can. All you're going to be doing is, just filling in a number, and they're going to be giving you a high number to pay back. Are you taking any proper credits? Are you taking any negotiations on anything? I'm saying, do you qualify for offer and compromise? They probably on the IRS. I have a lot of clients say, what's that? Well, you called the IRS, you're on the site. They didn't mention that. Well, first of all, not everyone qualifies for that, but they don't represent you, right? Their job is to get as much money as they can. So I'm not going to say, hey, you could actually qualify for 5 cents on the dollar offer.
Exactly.
So you always want, because the tax thing, it's no different than being in a lawsuit. You want to have a lawyer, even if you're innocent, or, you just want to have representation.
Exactly. Kevin, what rights do taxpayers have during the IRS collection process?
Well, you have the right to get their file, the right to pay only what you're owed, right? Sometimes you have a right to first-time penalty abatement or interest. Sometimes, right? You may qualify for offer and compromise, right? So you may qualify for what's called a currently non-collectible, CNC, meaning, hey, it's a tough situation right now, so I can't pay. They'll back up to 2 years, but they'll come around again. But if they're really coming after you and you qualify for what they call the CNC, then we do it for you, or you can do it yourself, but you can do it for you. And, because that means like making these payments or levying you or garnishing you would put you in a situation where you can't feed your family or something. It's a really tough situation. And they'll back off, but at least they know the situation, and they come back 6 months or 2 years, they review it again. But at least, you have to worry about them levying you. What happens is people don't open the mail. I mean, I can give you a stack right here of that one guy who came in there. I brought a stack of this thick. It's on my desk right now, right?
Oh,
They're all Illinois Department of Revenue. I'm like, I tell you, where's the IRS one, right? So,
yeah.
who am I calling? Who am I representing you for, right? But all, unopened, right? They're open now.
Yeah.
But, so, the IRS, if they're being ignored, right?
Is he in a lot of trouble?
You have a hardship. They don't know, you don't have to pay or non-collectible. They don't know any of this stuff. So They simply want you to have a representative talk to them and tell them stuff. Also, you have a collection due process, right? You have what they call a cap, appeals. So even if you get turned down for something, there's different appellate levels to go at, right? And there's different deadlines for those. It's also the right to go to the U.S. tax court. That's one of your rights as well, right? So you don't have to say, oh, the IRS did all this. No, you got rights too. You pay what you owe, and you qualify for what you qualify for. And you have your appeal rights and a right to be going to court if you have to. So I'm not saying everyone should be going to court, but guess what? On the appeals in the court, it's like sometimes the more experienced people with the IRS you're dealing with, sometimes it's easier because they get it. It's the Internal Revenue Code and the Internal Revenue Manual, right? And there's case law and stuff too. It's not rocket science. You know what I'm saying? A lot of times the IRS person says, "Oh, you don't qualify for this." Yeah, you do. Internal Revenue Manual section so-and-so. You know, you got to point it out to them sometimes. It's like thousands of pages, you know what I'm saying? So I get it, you know what I'm saying? But, you know, they don't always know either. And or just because they say or they disallow a deduction or disallow an expense doesn't mean it's going to, that they're right. Because maybe they're wrong. Let's appeal it.
Kevin, tell people how they can reach you.
BenjaminLaw.com or NobleTaxRelief.com, 312-853-3100. But you just go on the webpage, BenjaminLaw.com or NobleTaxRelief.com. You can put your name in there, or they have the phone numbers there, or ways to contact me, or go on the webpage, you put your name in, and I'll get a form for you, you know, that you said, call me, you know, or, you know, go to Calendly, you know, if you have a Calendly thing, Calendly.com/Kevin Benjamin. That's my Calendly link. So you just, you know, get on my schedule, just go online.
And you can handle a case anywhere in the state of Illinois. Is that correct?
I do what?
You can handle cases with anywhere in Illinois. Actually, you can handle federal cases throughout the country.
Yeah, I mean, the taxes are IRS is a national. State, I mean, I'm state licensed in Illinois and Florida, but I'm also licensed in various federal courts. So I may not be in a state court like Wisconsin. I'm not state barred in Wisconsin, but there's 2 U.S. district federal courts in Wisconsin. I'm a member of both. Therefore, I'm also in the BK court for both, and I have cases going for both. So you don't always need to be state barred to represent someone in a bankruptcy, but sometimes you do, you know. But you know, and if I can't do it, I belong to national bankruptcy groups. I have one of our conferences, a national conference, Dallas starting Monday. I'm leaving Sunday, you know, for the week. So, you know, there's people all over the country, you know what I'm saying? So, you know, if you need someone somewhere else, I just get your recommendation. But the IRS, that's pretty much national. Because there's no, unless you're going to even tax court, it's not a big deal. But usually with the IRS, you're just negotiating. So it's not like I have to be licensed in a certain state.
Kevin, thank you so much. Kevin will be back again with us next month. And also, we'll be running the tax relief part of our show again next week. Kevin, thanks so much, bro.
Guys, thank you. Appreciate it. See you later.
Stay safe in that Chicago City.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Hey, that's Kevin Benjamin. He's our bankruptcy and tax relief attorney in the state of Illinois. That's it for us today. We'll be back again with you next week with more Ask the Experts.
Thanks for tuning in today to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Tune in next week and every week to hear more from our experts on personal injury, insurance, air condition repairs, estate planning, Medicare, and many other topics in the areas of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. See you next week.